Welcome back. We are here ready for part 2 of our interview with my good buddy, Captain Mark Pieniozek. We're going to start talking now about some Saginaw Bay fishing, both fall open water, and I know you like the fall and early winter jig fishing on the Saginaw River. I know that's one of your favorites.
It is.
Let's start with the fall walleye fishing, the trolling in open water.
Okay.
Again, you being a longtime Saginaw Bay guy, how have you seen that bite kind of evolve over the last 10, 12, 15 years where really there was nobody there to all of a sudden it's now a big deal?
Well, there used to be 3 of us out there fishing the Saginaw Bay in the fall, and now there can be up to 300 to 400 of my closest friends. It started out being 3 of us, and it is just really blown up to be one of the. Actually, I think it's the Saginaw Bay's best fishery that we have for numbers and size.
So we see a lot of fish kind of disappear in the summertime. You know, you and I both guide in the Inner Bay there all summertime, and we're catching a lot of 15 to 21, 22-inch fish. You know, 24, 25 inches is a big deal.
Right.
As we get past turnover and we get into this mid-50, low-50 range all the way into ice up, we get a whole different group of fish coming back in the Inner Bay.
Yes, we do. And, you know, just a couple weeks ago, guys were catching 7-pounders, 7, 8-pounders. And so what happens is as the water cools off, we get the fish that come into spawn that leave the Saginaw Bay in the spring, and they go out to deep water. They go all the way up to Alpena, the Mackinac Bridge, Port Huron. They work their way back to the Inner Bay. So we get all those big fish that we never seem to catch in the summer, but we can catch them in the fall, and it is absolutely phenomenal.
What kind of areas are we fishing? So I know you're still fishing out of Linwood. Are we fishing the same kind of areas we're fishing in the summer? Are we fishing a little shallower? Are we fishing a little closer to the river channel? What kind of areas do we kind of need to look for if we're going to go up there in the fall?
The fall bite is just like the summer bite. They can be everywhere. I'd like to tell you they're in one place.
That's the wrong answer.
But it's the truth.
It is.
So there are times when we can catch, there'll be a pot of fish, they'll be up close, tight, and 8 to 10 feet of water. And then there are my buddies out in 30 feet out by the buoy 1 and 2, and they're catching big fish too. Yeah. So it's the same areas because what's happening is those fish are coming back chasing bait fish. Right. The bait fish go back to the same areas. The walleye are going to be those same areas as well.
Do you find that you rely on your electronics a little bit more in the colder water than you do in the summertime, or do you just kind of wing it, or do you make sure you're on fish in the fall because they're probably in smaller schools and kind of moving a lot more than they are in the summertime?
I use my electronics a lot, as well as you do. The Saginaw Bay, I think, in the fall is a little tougher to use your electronics because a lot of the fish are up high in the water column. So a lot of the fish we're only catching 20, 30 feet back off the boards, and those fish you're probably not going to mark. The lower fish, the deeper fish, obviously going to mark them like you do in the summer. So there's fish all up and down in the water column because the water is so cold. Like right now it's 42 degrees, and here in a couple more weeks when the fishing gets even better, it's going to be in the high 30s. So they can be anywhere in the water column. So sometimes you can catch fish without marking any. I know a couple years ago there was a guy that called me up and asked me to come out, and I told him we were catching fish, and he came out behind me, caught 2 or 3 fish, then he left. I'm not naming names or anything like that, but he could be the guy sitting next to me here, I don't know. And he left and went somewhere else and told me he couldn't catch fish if he wasn't marking fish.
I have a hard time doing that. I remember that day very well.
And that's all part of it. So it makes it very difficult, the Saginaw Bay, just to rely on your electronics. Yeah. So sometimes you have to rely on what the fish are telling you on your outside boards at 20, 30 back, which is only a couple feet under the surface of the water. So you got to use them both and just keep working around. And when you get on pods, stay on them.
Yeah, I think that's important in the fall.
Yep.
What kind of baits are you fishing? Because I know summertime we're fishing a lot of shorter, fatter baits that have pretty erratic action. How does your bait selection change as we get into colder water or fall? Right.
So basically what we end up using is more body baits. We end up using more body baits, and we're trolling a lot slower. 1, 2, 1, 5, because the metabolism has slowed down. So we're using bigger body baits because the minnows and everything that we're going after are now at the biggest point that they'll ever be in their life. So we use bigger body baits with a slower wobble, and we're obviously because we're going slower. So That's what we're doing, and basically what I try to do is stagger the water column, trying to let the fish tell me what they want, and I'll start at 20 back all the way back to 100 back, trying to figure out where they're at, and using electronics also.
So you've got baits, you want a little bit, you want a nice wobble at slow speeds. I'm looking at the bait you brought. Big build baits, even running very short behind the board as opposed to shallow diving baits that have a more tight action.
Correct.
You're using more bigger build baits?
Yes.
Talk a little bit about this one. I know this is kind of one of your favorites here.
This is actually a new lure that Salmo has come out with, and it is a huge build body bait. So the body itself is the same size pretty much as any of the rest of the body baits you'll see out on the market. The only difference is the bill is probably 2.5 inches.
The bill's huge.
The bill is huge, and this thing will dive down by itself to 40 feet. Which is another huge thing for us fishermen, because usually to get down deeper, we've had to add weight, snap weights, or whatever we use to get our stuff down. Everyone has their own thing what they like to use, but this takes that out of there. So you can go down to Erie in the deepest waters and without any weight be able to pull it down.
And then the kind of waters we're fishing in Saginaw Bay, where we're running baits 6 to, let's say, 15 feet most days is kind of a good number.
Right.
We don't have to let a lot of line.
No, and that's the other thing that's huge for me too, is the fact that I don't have to let a lot of line out to get down deep. And just like with your customers, the whole key is trying to get fish in and out as soon as possible, so that we're not, and less tangles with less line out. So I think those are all important things.
Right. All right, so when guys look at a bait, don't just grab a shallow diving bait because you're fishing shallow.
Correct.
Sometimes that bigger bill creates a completely different action and lets you be much more efficient. A bait that dives deeper than you need lets you be more efficient with getting rods in and getting rods out.
Correct.
And like you said, in the fall, these fish are in small pods, and the windows of opportunity are short in the fall. You may see a bite for half an hour and not catch another fish for 2 hours, and all of a sudden that bite fires up, so the faster you can get back on them, the more you're going to catch.
Correct. And the thing I like about this is I can dig this right through the sand and the mud on the Saginaw Bay, which there are certain times when especially in the early morning, those fish a lot of times like to sit right down in that mud, and this will get you right down into that mud and pick up fish that you wouldn't get.
What kind of colors do you like to run in the fall? Do you see a difference between what you like in the summer based on what you like in the fall, and kind of what are your two or three favorites in the fall? Write this down.
You might want to need an eraser because it'll probably change. I don't know if I really have a favorite color or favorite colors. I try to let the fish determine that to me.
Okay.
I will run a variety of baits out and try to figure out what the fish want. I think that's the most important thing, is letting the fish tell you, not you trying to force something down the fish's mouth.
That is an absolutely ginormous lip.
Yes, it is.
Holy moly. So if I had to pin you down, we're going to go fish on Saginaw Bay tomorrow. And I said, Mark, here's your deal. You get to pick 3 lures on your side of the boat. You don't know anything else. We're just going to kind of go out there and kind of wing it like most guys do.
Right.
Right? What are you going to pick?
Probably Fire Tiger, because Fire Tiger always catches fish.
Fire Tiger gets fish everywhere on everything. I agree with that.
So I hate to, a lot of my buddies that are captains just go, I can't believe you're using Fire Tiger. It works. So if you're not going to throw one out there that works in every body of water, I think
on every
it's
fish,
foolish.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what kind of bait it is.
Fire Tiger is probably one. I like dark purples. Sometimes the darker colors work. And I'm like a brown bronze kind of guy. I kind of like that myself too.
Yeah, I like that copperish type.
Yes.
With purple or pink accents in the fall. That copper seems to catch more fish than silver and gold does most.
Yes.
A lot of times in the fall.
Yes, I agree.
Let's kind of shift gears a little bit. Let's go into the river.
Okay.
Because I know that once that bite starts, I know I would rather be in the Saginaw River than I would on Saginaw Bay. As much as I love to troll,
right.
By the time September rolls around, I've had enough trolling to last me a while.
Yep.
That fishery has changed the last couple of years. You know, when I first started fishing up there in the mid-'90s, and again, you probably knew this for a long time, so talk about this. You know, it used to be early, October, you could start catching big fish.
Right.
We haven't had that happen in the last 5 or 6 years because of the lack of flow in the river.
Right.
This year it's happened though.
Right.
So how do you kind of correlate, how do you kind of figure out when the river's do you have a system of kind of thinking river's going to be good this year, early, not be good, I need to stay on the bay longer?
A lot of it is all water flow. That's so I'm always looking at the currents on the Tittabawassee River and the Saginaw River. We usually always get a push of nice walleye early, like we did here a couple weeks ago. It's been 2 or 3 weeks now. So we get a push of those anywhere from 6 to 7, 8 pound fish. They come in, the bite's usually good for a couple weeks, and then it slows back down because they're waiting for a new push of fish to come in. So we'll go hammer on them a little bit, and then we'll wait. Like right now we have, obviously there's river flooding all over. So I'm not in there right now, but you can still go in there and catch fish, but just not the traditional ways of going right down the middle of the river and trying to catch fish in the deep water, because that's not happening. It's muddy, there's a lot of current there, but if you can get off to the side of the river and go in the shallower water where there's less current and it's not as muddy, there are a lot of fish to be taken in the shallow part of the river.
So let's talk about that. So obviously a completely different idea than Detroit. A whole lot less current, a whole lot less depth. Current breaks aren't really that big of a deal as much as they can be on Detroit.
Correct.
How do you attack Saginaw? Is it still a vertical jigging thing? Is it a casting jig thing? Is it maybe some shallow crankbait? How do you kind of attack that shallower water, less current?
So there's a bunch of different ways to attack it from the sides in shallow water. We will actually cast jigs and bounce them. We'll use some body baits to toss over there and bounce the jig those over, which is becoming very popular all over the country now. A lot of the pros are doing it, and it's catching on with the amateur guys.
So you're talking baits like shiver minnows, rattle traps, that type of stuff.
Exactly. Yep. I mean, it's huge being able to cast those things in there, jig them and bounce them off the bottom and bring them deeper as you come. So the shallow water bite, I think, is a very unlooked at thing by a lot of people. A lot of amateur fishermen, I should say.
Where do you kind of cut off vertical fishing versus horizontal fishing as far as depth? Where's kind of that number? For you, it doesn't vary with water clarity, but kind of where's that number that, you know what,
15, 16 feet probably.
Okay, so anything shallower than that, you're trying to cast.
Yep. I like to cast to them, and there's a lot of fish off the edges. But in the same respect, the Detroit River is the same way.
It is.
The shallow water bite is...
Hey. We're talking about the same...
It's kind of the same thing, except there's more current.
So Mark just opened up a little secret here that some of you guys who comment every year that the big fish don't seem to be quite as numerous in the Detroit River. You may be approaching it wrong. I'm not going to tell you how we know that, but
correct.
You may be approaching how you attack big fish in the Detroit River wrong. It's not the traditional way of catching big fish anymore. And that has a lot to do with the amount of fish in the river, how long they stay in the river. There's a lot of factors to that.
Yep.
So that's a great segue, because a lot of guys are really uncomfortable casting jigs in shallow water.
Correct.
A lot of guys don't want to go to Detroit and do that. It's a little snaggier, and they know that if they go out, they can still catch their fish.
Right.
A great place to go practice this, go to the Saginaw River in the fall time, when it doesn't really matter, you catch a bunch of fish, right? Go practice. Go find some current eddies. Go find some breaks. Go find some structure in shallow water. Grab some 3/8, half, 5/8 ounce jigs. The same plastics. I'm assuming the same plastics used in Detroit.
Yep.
Right? A couple shiver minnows, and go practice this where there is a gazillion 15, 16-inch fish in the Saginaw River. You're going to get bit.
Yep.
Then you can take that technique to Detroit.
No, I agree with you. And I think the biggest key with that is, especially the shallow bite, is your side imaging and your electronics. You guys have to learn how to use it. You have to learn how to find it and trust it, because when you mark fish off to the side, you can go catch them. So basically what I did when I first started, when the side imaging and all that got really good, I went up and down the Saginaw River and I marked every spot where I thought would hold fish. If I saw a log, I marked it. Now a lot of times they move because we get the heavy current, so it moves. But I ran around the river, and if I found some rocks, I'd mark it, and we'd cast to them, and remarkably, we caught fish.
Amazing.
All right. So I learned a lot about my own river with electronics.
By being able to see off to
the side, which I would have never, ever fished it in a million years. But an old dog knew tricks.
Old dog knew tricks. What about the quality of fish we see in Saginaw River? You know, when I first started up there in the mid-'90s, it was nothing to have a cooler full of fish, and they were all 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 pounds.
Yep.
And then we had a couple years where you could barely catch a fish that kept. Now, I have not fished the Saginaw River in about 5 or 6 years now. How is the mix of fish size-wise in that river now?
Now we have everything. I mean, you can catch the 7, 8, 9 pounders. 2 years ago, a buddy of mine, just before the river closed, they had a little tournament out of Zilwaukee. Some guys just threw it together, thought they'd have a little fun. They end up with like 100 boats. And my buddy in shallow water caught a 14 pounder.
Wow.
So there are big fish in the Saginaw River, but there's a bunch of eater fish. So he in turn caught that big fish in shallower water. And so there are big fish there. You have to get out of the traditional ways if you want to catch those.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with going out and catching your eaters.
No.
I'm all about it. I get it. I get it from a customer aspect. Why my people want to go out and catch a bunch of eater fish. Nothing wrong with it. I'm happy with that. But there are big fish in there. You just can't look in the small fish areas.
I think that is an awesome point, right? If you're catching 2-pound fish, you're not going to catch a 12-pounder there.
Correct.
And conversely, if you're concentrating on catching 11, 12, 13, 14-pound fish, you're probably not going to catch a bunch.
Correct.
So you got to kind of figure out what do you want your day, every year we have that magical day in Detroit where we get 6 or 7 30 inches in one trip, and it's just that those are very, very rare,
yes,
right? Where you get 25 eaters and you get a half dozen that are 30 inches, and you got a bunch of those days are, and you really can't count them because they're such an anomaly, right?
Correct. Yes.
Those are usually instant rebooks for next year.
Right. But that's too easy. The hard part is getting the rebook with 2 fish.
Exactly, right. But if you are going to attack big fish, I think this applies to every place that we fish, Detroit, Saginaw, even on the bay.
Yes.
Open water trolling in the summertime. If you're going to attack big fish, you've got to get out of the spot where you're going to catch 30 keepers because they're just not in the same place.
Right. Plus, those small fish are so aggressive, and the bigger fish they're not as aggressive as small fish. And they're a little pickier, a little choosier.
I think that's our issue in Detroit, is there's so many fish in Detroit now that you can't get a jig to the bottom long enough for a big fish to see it without 27, 15 inches coming and getting it, which is good. For us as guides, I like that. Do you do any guiding on the Saginaw River? Is that something that's popular with guys?
Oh, I do. I do a lot in the fall and then in the spring, just before our river closes on March 15th. So I will, as soon as the ice gets out and I don't have any ice fishing trips, we bounce right into the river and start pounding on fish in the river.
And that river, Saginaw Bay, is open all year, but the river has a close and open date?
Correct. March 15th to the last Saturday in April.
So we're closed on March 15th, and we fire up again the last Saturday in April. So we have no fishing during that time.
Correct, in the river.
Okay. Any special regulations? Is it still 8 fish? Is it?
It is 8 fish up until the Rush Street Bridge. Okay. As you go south, and then south from that bridge is 15 inches and 5.
So we're 15 and 5 south of Rush Street. And we're
Center Street.
Yes, that's right. Center Street.
Center Street.
And then we're 13 and 8 from there to the lake.
Yes. And up to Tawas.
All the way to Tawas. So there you make one long pass.
Exactly. You're good to go.
If you get past the ice.
Right.
What's a traditional end time on Saginaw Bay? When do we kind of, traditionally, when's that time to put the boat away, time to take a little break and then wait for ice fishing to kind of get up? Is there a date, or have you fished all the way into January, February on the bay some years?
There are we've had years where the bay hasn't froze or just froze over skim and we can still get out. If you can get down the bay, there's fish to be caught in the boat.
Yeah.
So if you're asking me if I ever shut down, I don't. We're still fishing up until the ice is too thick for me to break the boat out and smash my boat.
Right.
We're out there fishing.
Are you using the big boat in the fall, or do you put the big boat away?
No, big boat's away. I use the Lund.
Okay.
Or the airboat sometimes, depending on if there's ice flows in the river. We'll run out there and jig it like that.
How have you seen, we're going to wrap this up with this. How have you seen, if you had to kind of pinpoint 1 or 2 things, how have you seen the Saginaw Bay fishery change from the time you were kind of a kid and the walleye started to now? What have you kind of seen the biggest change of how people attack it, or how the fish act, or how it's just been kind of accepted? Well,
my history on the bay, I caught my first walleye in 1977 with a lure that I got from Frank's Great Outdoors. I was going out perch fishing, because that's the only thing we had. Right. And he goes, "Hey, Mark, you got to try this. There's walleye out there." And I was like, "What's a walleye?" So he goes, it's part of the perch family. It's only bigger. Try this lure. Go out there and fish. So we went out ice fishing. We were in 7 feet of water off Valentine Road towards the end of the season, March. And I walked out and I caught a 6-7 pound walleye, and I was hooked ever since. So back then our fish were bigger. We didn't have as many fish, but they were bigger. Like you said, the 80s and 90s, we had big fish. But we didn't have, there's a lot of times you'd go out and if you caught 2 or 3 fish, it was a great day.
Yeah, good day.
Right? And so now with the planting, and now that they are spawning on their own now, and no one's planted in, I think it's like 10 or 12 years now, they have not planted a fish. So we've gone from up and down, and we've had good classes and bad classes through the 80s and 90s and early 2000s that we struggled catching fish sometimes, and now it's to the point where, obviously, as you know, it's a world-class fishery. Yeah. We get people from all over the country. So it's gone through stages of big fish, small fish, and there for a while you couldn't catch anything, but it was about a 12-incher or 13-incher, and now that they've dropped it back down to 13 and 8, which I personally wasn't a fan of.
Yeah, I'm not a fan either,
but it's working.
Yep. Seems to be.
Right. So I can't second guess that program, but so our fishery right now is people always say the old days, better than the old days.
Yeah.
This is the old days right now.
This is the good old days right now.
It is not. I've never seen it better as far as for numbers and for big fish that you can catch.
And again, you have to approach those big fish different.
Correct.
You're not going to catch 25, 18-inchers and a 12-pounder the same day at the same spot.
Right.
It just doesn't happen that way.
Correct.
Appreciate your time. Can you come back later, maybe in a month or two, and do an ice fishing segment? I want to talk to you a little bit about the ice fishing.
Do you know anything about ice fishing?
I don't know anything. That's why I want you back. That's why I want you back. Here's what I know. It's damn cold, and I'm probably not going to go.
I know you're not. Yes, I will come back.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Guys, hey, Mark, thanks for being here. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate you coming down all the way from Saginaw to join us. Guys, wrap up this. Just a great time with my good buddy, Captain Mark. We've known each other for, I don't know, 10 years now, 11 years now?
Probably.
A long time. We pass each other every day on the river. We usually say hi to each other. So it's good to have him here. Great fisherman. If you want to get a hold of Captain Mark and maybe book a charter on the river, on Saginaw Bay, on Detroit River, or maybe even go duck hunting with him, you do that.
Yeah, I do that.
Right? You can see his contact information here at the bottom of the screen. Check him out. Just a great guy. You'll have a riot with him. A fun guy to fish with, and one of my favorite guys to talk to and share information with. I really enjoy Captain Mark. Thanks for coming down. All right, guys, thanks for joining us here at Teaching Fishing. We'll see you next time.